This season on My Comic Shop History, we took you behind the scenes of comic conventions with the organizers, pulled up a chair next to the creators in Artist Alley, hunted for grails with the collectors, donned a costume with the cosplayers, and ate breakfast with the retailers. We recounted tales from shows big and small, from coast to coast, as we explored the ever-expanding world of comic conventions. And now, the season finale of My Comic Shop History. This episode is brought to you in part by a family of film festivals: the Brightside Tavern Film Festival in Jersey City in March, the Point Lookout Film Festival on Long Island in April, and the Hang On to Your Shorts Film Festival in Asbury Park in May. Find them all on Film Freeway, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Visit iTunes or ashareduniverse.com to tune into the official Hang On to Your Shorts podcast. I hope you'll check out these festivals. Welcome to the season finale of My Comic Shop History. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. It's time to take one last lap around the convention floor. My guest for this episode is more than a vendor. He is a true road warrior who seems to attend a convention every weekend. I'm pleased to welcome back to the show Undiscovered Realm owner, Chris Wilcock.
Hello, hello.
Welcome back. Season finale.
Yeah, it's exciting.
This is
a while.
This is a coveted guest spot. People were, beating down the doors to get on this episode, and I was like, no, it's got to be Chris.
I appreciate it. It's been a little while. I feel rusty, so hopefully I do a good job.
It's been a long season because you were on with Delando very early on. We talked about C2E2, but that was back in April.
Yeah, it feels like another life.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I wanted to bring you back and get more in depth and really talk about your experiences as a vendor at all of these shows. Can you just give me a number in a year? I mean, how many shows are you attending as a vendor?
It varies year to year. I think our peak was like 35 or 36, which is a lot. It feels like a lot, but when you see it like in a list, you're like, holy crap. I think I don't know what we did this year. It was probably around 30-ish, give or take. We definitely cut a couple back, but we added a couple, so I don't know where we're at. One of my goals for next year is to like refine it just a little more. I think like 25 is probably the sweet spot, even though that's half the year, but at least it gives you some breaks,
Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny because I know you're used to it, right? And so the number, it is what it is to you. But to me, and I'm sure to a lot of our listeners, that's a staggering number, 30-something out of 52 weeks of a year.
That's when you think about it like that, where you're like, whoa, hold on a second. I've been gone like every week of the year. And, like once you factor in holidays and stuff like that, like it doesn't leave you with much,
Yeah.
I'm excited because we only have like 2 shows left until March, actually. So it's almost over. And then we get a nice break through the winter.
So as we were recording this a few days ago, you were in Rhode Island for a show. When you're grinding it out all weekend and then you get home, like you finally get home, what is your routine? What are the first things you do to decompress from one of these shows? And I'm sure it's probably different depending on how intense and how big the show is, but like generally speaking, do you have a go-to routine?
No, usually if we don't have another show the next weekend, you have a little more time to decompress a little bit. So like Monday, both of the stores are closed, which is nice. So usually if it's within like 4 hours or so, we'll drive home Sunday night. So that's what we did for this one. We got home at like 3 or 4 in the morning. And so you kind of just sit there and like, I see my dog, I pet her, take care of, check the mail, just normal things. And then you're just happy to sleep in for a little bit the next day. If I can, I love to go get like a massage the next day, but not every show, but if I can, because my back just starts to kill me after a while. So that's like my treat myself type thing. But I don't know. I just kind of zone out and just catch up on life a little bit, because people don't realize, like, even though you're gone for the show for 3 days, but then the day before you're setting up, maybe the day before that you're traveling, and then the day before that you're restocking and loading the van. So it ends up being like a 5-6 day process, and that's even for one of the smaller shows. Something like New York Comic Con, you're talking about weeks. So yeah, it's weird, but it's nice to just kind of sit there and stare at a wall.
No, I can imagine. Well, when you mentioned the restocking in the van, so I promised I was going to do this, and I did. The other night, I spent probably more time than I should have scrolling through months worth of your Facebook
I post a lot, so that was probably a lot of work, so I'm sorry.
It felt kind of creepy. I feel like I'm stalking this guy. But I said I was going to do that because you do post a lot, and you chronicle everything. It's kind of cool. I dig it. Like
I don't do it like consciously, like, oh, I'm going to post. It just, I think I don't know. I never really thought about it a lot. It's just something I do. But like, I think like in a way, it is nice to chronicle it in a way, because like, especially with like things like, I don't know if you're familiar. There's an app called Time Hop, and it shows you all your posts from a year ago, 2 years ago, 3. So it's kind of cool to see what you were doing a year ago and relive some of these things. So I like it for that. And sometimes it's just like a good venting, I guess. But I don't really think about it. It's just something I do. But so I apologize if I post too much, but
no, it's good stuff, and it's given us material for this episode, which we'll get into in a minute. But it's funny, like on Facebook, that the Facebook memories, right? So they show you what you posted, on that day, right? And it's funny because when I look at that stuff, I see how my life has changed, and how like most of my posts during college were just about TV. It was like, oh, watching Prison Break tonight, and then during law school, it was pretty much just complaining about law school. And now it's just the shameless self-promotion constantly with all this stuff. But it's funny, and especially looking back at the TV posts in particular, I'm like, man, my problems were small back then. It's like,
they seem, but that's what's cool about it. And if you didn't post about these things, you would have no idea. You just kind of like lose, you get lost,
I know.
So it is really cool to look back, and that's one of the main things I like about it. So
yeah, well, no, I thank you for posting as much as you do, because like I said, I screenshotted a bunch of stuff.
Sweet.
And again, I think we can use that as a jumping off point, because certain themes emerged. So we can talk about that. Before we really dive in, if you'll help me out here, I have it's the season finale, right? It's a little bit of housekeeping and some announcements about the future of the show. We want people to know this good stuff here.
Of course.
So as we get to the end of every season, I always like to give some shout outs, thank people who help make this possible. So as always, my Australian guardian angel, Dan Pritchard, he does the theme music for all of the podcasts. So we want to thank him. I haven't hit him up yet for music for next season. And I'm kind of thinking of going in a slightly different direction. Our mutual friend, Ralph Puma, he and his wife-to-be are in a band out of Nashville.
Cool, I see
Rosewood
them
Rebels.
All the time. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, Rosewood Rebels. And they have a couple of songs out now. I know they're working on more. And I'm kind of thinking of taking it back to the first season of My Comic Shop History, when I had a Ralph Puma song at the beginning and end of every episode. So we might do something like that. We might give Dan a little break and incorporate music a little bit more next season. I'm kind of toying with that idea. But we want to thank Dan for the music that he contributed to this season. Really do appreciate it. Of course, the guests, everyone who came on the show, it feels... When I say this, I'm like, I hope people don't think I'm disingenuous. I mean it sincerely. Like, I really enjoy talking to everybody. And it's the sort of thing where the show's been going on long enough now. A lot of the people who have been on it have been on before, so I know that I'm going to have a good conversation. And any new guest I've either met, or they at least come very highly recommended from someone I trust. So by the time we get to the recordings, thankfully it's worked out very nicely, where we've had great chats. So I really want to thank everyone who's been part of the show. And of course, everyone who's listened, everyone who's liked, commented, shared, rated, reviewed, like all that stuff really, really helps a lot. So I want to thank everyone. Our sponsors, you're one of them.
Hey.
So I want to thank you for your support. We also have our family of film festivals, Brightside Tavern, Hang On To Your Shorts, and Point Lookout Film Festival. We want to thank them as well for their support. I recently started developing a new form of sponsorship. I've only gotten a couple nibbles on this so far, but hopefully it'll be something that grows. I know from firsthand experience, a lot of comic shops, it's hard for them to lay out money, cash money, for a commercial on a podcast. So the idea that I had was that if stores are interested, they can contribute graphic novels, both for my own just personal reading, but also for potential book club podcasts. So I've got a little bit of interest on that front. So if you're listening to this and you're a shop owner or employee or a customer and you want to bring this to the attention of your shop, I really hope you'll take me up on it, because I think it's a great way.
It is a good idea.
Yeah, right? I think it makes sense.
Yeah, everybody wins.
Exactly. That's the plan. So we'll see. And of course, my wife, Stephanie. So, like literally right now, as we are recording in our apartment, she has been displaced from the living room. So I thank her, not just for giving me the space, but also for hearing me talk about this more than anyone should ever have to. And when we talk more about My Comic Shop Country down the line, I'll be talking more about her contributions to that. But it was really invaluable having her on the road with me filming. It made a world of difference.
Yeah, and not being mad that you're doing it or gone. That makes all the difference.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how I would be able to do it otherwise. So those are our thanks, for this season 4 of My Comic Shop History. I think the time has come to announce the theme for season 5. Ooh. Now, I've given you a little hint of this, but I'll lay it out for you more now and for listeners. I'm very excited about this. So I had a couple of ideas for different directions to go in, and like whenever I've been stumped I always go back to the title of the show, right? My comic shop history. So, as you know, and regular listeners know, Alternate Realities was the Westchester comic shop where I spent the most of my time and was the most formative for me. And we've talked about it a lot. But, Alternate Realities was not the only Westchester comic shop that was a part of my comic shop history. There were a number of other area stores that I went to. Some I just went to occasionally. Others I went to quite regularly. And I've never fully explored them on the show. And so that will be the theme for next season. My county's comic shop history.
That's pretty awesome.
And, I've lived in Westchester my whole life, as have you, correct?
Yeah, yep.
And the idea for this season is to try to tell the story of Westchester through its comic shops. And one of the interesting / sad things that I guess I realized as I was thinking about these stores, they're all gone. And when I'm talking Westchester stores, I'm talking like these key quintessential stores. Comic Book Heaven, Dragon's Den, which I know is huge for you.
Yeah. Definitely.
Both the Central Avenue location and Cross County, there were a couple. One If by Cards, Two If by Comics. Now that still exists as American Legends, but it doesn't exist in the form that it did previously.
No, definitely not.
And of course, Heroes World, the store that was the beginning for me.
I would be so interested in hearing more about Heroes World because I have like the faintest of memories of going there and buying toys when I was like a very little kid. So it'd be cool. I don't know anything about it, honestly.
Heroes World actually has an interesting history, which we'll get into, because not only was it a chain of stores, but they were also a distributor.
Oh, wow.
And they were part of a very interesting, shall we say, period in Marvel Comics history, where Marvel bought them and they were their sole distributor.
Oh, wow.
It led to a lot of issues.
Idea. Wow.
So we're going to get into that. So I'm really excited about this.
This could be like really, really cool.
I think so.
It will be really, really cool, actually.
And the thing, too, is, so kind of on this note, and for people who are familiar with the store, you'll know who I'm talking about. And Chris, of course, I know you know. The former manager of Comic Book Heaven was a gentleman named Bishop. He legally changed his name to Bishop because he was such a fan of the X-Men character. I tracked him down.
He also looks exactly like Bishop for
he does. Fair. But I tracked him down, and he's going to be on an episode. So I'm excited about this. So
inclusive.
My county's comic shop history, it's going to be 10 bi-weekly episodes. So slightly shorter season than we've been doing. 10 bi-weekly episodes starting early May. And I'm really excited about this. And like I said, kind of telling the story of Westchester through the stores, because even if you just talk about the malls, right? Heroes World was in the Galleria.
Yeah.
That's changed. We have the Westchester now. There's the
Cross County, forget it.
I know.
lived in that mall, and you can't even recognize it.
Yeah. So I think, for people who know Westchester, I think they'll get a lot out of it. But if you don't, this is really going to give you, my goal at least, is really a clear view of what the Westchester comic scene had been and how it's changed.
Yeah, plus you're going to get, like, even if you're not from here and you don't care, like, you're going to get great stories from the inside, especially during a really interesting time. Like, this is, like the 90s and early 2000s where things were crazy,
Right. So that's the goal. And, there will be, like I said, Bishop, he was a manager at the store, so we'll have him on. I lined up the owners. That's a husband and wife team who own American Legends, which is what One If by Cards is now. So they'll be on it. So you will get that behind the counter perspective that we've had on the show before. But kind of my goal with this is to expand a bit and not have it be necessarily so business focused, because we've done a lot of that. And I really want to talk about what these stores meant to those of us who shop there. Like, again, Heroes World was huge for me, like Dragon's Den was for you. So, of course, I've already invited you to be a guest on the Dragon's Den episode.
That'd be awesome.
But so, like, that's the kind of stuff that I want to get into. So I am very excited about that. So that'll be starting in May 2019.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to hear it. It's going to be great.
And as far as, what else is going on within the world of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network, this season I started the My Comic Shop History Patreon page. And first and foremost, I want to thank everyone who has already signed up for that. I want to give a shout out to our newest VIP patron, Jason Slade. So thank you, Jason, and everyone who has pledged. If you haven't signed up yet, I've been mentioning it in all of these episodes. If you haven't signed up yet, it's like, I get it, right? We're all subscribed to so many things already. People are used to podcasts being free. There's a lot of content I know people are just trying to catch up on already. So the prospect of signing up for something else, might not be something that you're looking to do at the moment. And if that's the case, I understand. But what I would ask, if you're a regular listener of this show, if you've been following, if you like the show, you like what I do, just check out the Patreon page. I hosted a retailer panel at C2E2 back in April. I recorded it. I put that up on the Patreon page for free. So you could just go there and listen to it. You don't have to sign up or do anything. But I really encourage you to just go there, patreon.com/mycomicshophistory. Check out the free episode. Take a look at some of the exclusive podcasts that are available. And if it's something that you think you'd be interested in, I really would appreciate a pledge of any amount. Any level from $1 and up gets you some form of exclusive podcast. So anything that you pledge is going to get you something. And every pledge just helps me be able to continue to make this show. So, there are a number of expenses that are related to the show. I'm obviously paying to host the media files online. We're doing this recording in my apartment, but there are plenty where, I am, paying for gas and tolls and all that stuff to go places. The equipment itself, I've laid out a lot of money over the years. And that's to say nothing of the time, which I don't think I could ever quantify.
It's a labor of love.
It is a labor of love, and I love doing it. And, this is something I've taken upon myself. So it's not like I necessarily feel entitled to anything. But again, any amount that anyone is willing to pledge really does help. And again, you're getting extra content. And that's sort of the goal moving forward, right? So the main seasons of My Comic Shop History, they'll continue to be free. You can get them on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Podomatic. That will continue. But the goal with Patreon is that if you're a member, you'll have additional exclusive content year-round. So if you like listening to the show, you're not limited to just the seasons anymore. You're going to have year-round content. So just as an example, we're recording the finale right now. Once we're done here, you can listen to the after show for this episode where Chris and I keep talking. So that's going to be available right now. In a couple of weeks, on December 12th, we'll be releasing a Patreon exclusive epilogue to the season. And I'm really excited about this. My guest is going to be Archie Comics president Mike Pellerito. We're going to talk about comic conventions from the perspective of a publisher.
Are you gonna get him for the Dragon's Den episode?
The Dragon's Den thing is going to be a two-parter, so you'll be on one and he'll be on the other. So Mike's going to be my guest on this Patreon exclusive epilogue to season 4 in just a couple of weeks. And then I still have 2 more episodes to go on my Superman-themed spinoff, my Superfan History. So at the beginning of December, we have an episode with Alan Boss from It's Vintage in Mendham, New Jersey. It's going to be very appropriate for the holidays. We're going to be talking about Superman merchandise through the years. And then at the beginning of January, this episode, I've been waiting years to do this episode. Comic book artist V. Ken Marion and I are going to talk Smallville. I've been waiting to do this for a very long time. So again, after today, you have the after show for this episode. You have the epilogue with Mike Pellerito from Archie Comics, and you have 2 more episodes of My Superfan History. So that'll close out the year and bring us into 2019. Then, this is where you come into the picture, my friend. One of the Patreon exclusive podcasts is Beyond My Comic Shop. So, I don't know, Chris, if you got a chance to listen or if listeners are familiar. Earlier this season, I did a 4-part Beyond My Comic Shop miniseries with Ben Lichtenstein from Zap Comics, and we talked all about his origins and the factors and forces that influenced him and shaped his business strategy as he is out there buying and selling back issues like a madman. And it was really interesting, and I got a lot of good feedback on that. And so I want to do more with that format, where I take 4 episodes with a particular guest or particular subject, and really just have the opportunity to get a little bit deeper and spend a little bit more time. So that's going to be one of the Patreon exclusives. And I'm very excited to announce that my guest for this first Beyond My Comic Shop miniseries is you.
Me.
Beyond My Comic Shop. Never stop, never popping. Now, the title itself is a little tongue-in-cheek, but I am very excited for this because, I think the fact that I've had you on the show as many times as I have, I always enjoy talking to you.
I appreciate it. I love being on.
And I really admire your work ethic. You have Undiscovered Realm. You have the tattoo shop, Addicted to Ink. You are a vendor at all of these conventions,
shows.
Right? You mount your own conventions. You do a tattoo con and you do a Comic Con, which we're going to talk about in the after show.
Sure.
So it's inspiring to me because I often feel like I've got so much stuff going on and it can be crushing sometimes. And then I look at what you're doing. I'm like, all right, keep moving forward.
We're all. Look at your slate. It's packed too. We're all doing stuff we love, but it's work.
Yeah, but no, it really is inspiring. And so that's kind of what I want to do. I want to take those few episodes and talk about what got you to this point and all the factors that influenced you.
That's
and,
awesome.
In the past, we've talked a lot, again, about pops and about conventions, but, I know you're a huge music fan. You go to concerts all the time.
Yeah.
You seem like you live at the Alamo. You're always seeing movies. The tattoos, of course, and that's a whole other side that we've only scratched the surface on in these episodes. So, there's really a lot for us to talk about. So I'm very excited about that. So that'll start aiming for 4 monthly episodes starting in February. That'll be Patreon exclusive at the $2 a month level. It was going to be $3, but I made it 2 because I want, we want to reduce those barriers to
Everybody's
entry.
got $2, Just drink 2 less Arizonas that month. You're good.
That's all. So that's what we have coming up. So I'm very excited for all of that. And yeah, I look forward to talking to you next season for the Dragon's Den stuff, and it's gonna be a lot.
I'm excited. Yeah,
it's gonna be great. All right, my last bit of business before we circle back to the Road Warrior here is my comic shop Country. So this is the documentary film that I've been very hard at work on in the background as we've been doing all these podcasts. So I'm hard at work editing, aiming to have the film done first quarter 2019. Oh, wow. The trailer will be out soon, so just make sure that you are following me on social media. I promise you won't be able to miss it. But follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Desi Westside, like the My Comic Shop History Facebook page. We have I started it this season, a Flat Squirrel Podcast Network Facebook group. So that's something else that you can join. The Flat Squirrel newsletter, which you can sign up for on the Flat Squirrel Productions website, and then of course, this show that you're listening to now, make sure you're subscribed. You can do it on Podomatic, iTunes, Google Play, or Spotify. That's the best way to ensure that you never miss an episode. So that's what we have coming up. I know you know this, and regular listeners know, it's very important to me that we reinvent the show each season. It'd be really easy for me to just keep telling alternate reality stories or keep talking about different comic shops. But I think it's for each season to have its own focus. It keeps me interested and engaged, and hopefully listeners too.
Yeah, but it's cool because you do branch out, but it still all ties into that core thing. So it's done well, at least,
I appreciate that. But yeah, it's like that core DNA that we always try to maintain as we're exploring these different areas. So really, thank you to everyone for rolling with us for all of these seasons and episodes. I genuinely love doing this, and I look forward to continuing to do more. All right. Thank you for indulging me.
No, it's great.
Now, let's talk about the Road Warrior here. So, like I said, a few themes emerged as I was going through, your Facebook posts.
I'm curious to see what these themes are too.
Well, one of the things, the vans and the restocking, those seem to pose a lot of challenges because that came up a bunch of times.
It's always some unique problem. Every week.
Well, so I want to get to that, but just real quick first. So one of your posts was about, and I remember this because I saw you that day, was about how it took you 2 hours to get down to New York Comic Con the first day of the show. What happened? Just traffic?
Yeah, it's just like, that's the thing you can't bank on either. It's like, you're like, all right, this show's 20 minutes away. This is great, right? Let's get up. You're already getting up at like the crack of dawn, before like a 20-hour day. So, any extra time, it's just hell. But just crazy traffic. Also, like, this is the thing people don't realize. Like, if you're pulling a trailer and stuff like that, you're like commercial. So, like, you can't go on parkways and stuff. So, like, if we have to go local, it takes 10 times. Like, I could drive to Philly faster than I can get like 40 minutes upstate. And because you got to go all these crazy ways, and like even like Google Maps or Apple, whatever, they don't route that stuff. So like you have to really pay attention, or that's why you see these guys like hitting underpasses and getting stuck, and the tickets are crazy if you go on the wrong highway. So like it's really scary. Like and that's one of the reasons like I get really nervous if like I'm not at the show, which is very rare, but like sending guys out because it's an easy mistake to make, and like you get like a ticket for like thousands of dollars or something, and then you're just like killed. So traffic is definitely a factor, especially when you're doing like these 20-hour drives and stuff like that. One accident, which you're probably going to run into along the way, could turn things into like, a 30-hour drive. And it's crazy.
It's amazing. So, in the previous episode, I spoke to Jeff Beck. He's the owner of East Side Mags. And so that gave us the retailer perspective. And, he sets up at maybe a handful of shows, right, in a year, and it was interesting to get that perspective. But, I was especially excited to talk to you, going to as many shows as you do, seeing as many shows and seeing as many parts of the country. And I know we've touched on this in other episodes, but I really wanted to get into this vendor experience that you've had. And, I really was thinking about you as I was walking the floor at New York Comic Con, because again, Undiscovered Realm specialize in pops and gaming, and specifically pops at these shows.
At the shows for sure. Yeah.
And again, for anyone who's, been to any of these conventions, they've likely seen your booth. It's always large and very prominent.
Yeah, definitely. People remember us.
I have to say this in a way that doesn't sound like a backhanded compliment, because I don't mean it that way. But kudos to the photography, because I feel like you photograph your booth in a way that I feel like gives it, like makes it seem even grander.
That's important, you know, like definitely I do, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to like trick anybody,
No,
but
no, no.
no, and I don't take it like that at all. But, you know, like I try to get everything in. Sometimes it's hard, you know, or the lighting sucks or blah, blah, blah. So, you know, we try to do our best, but you get used to it after a while.
Yeah. But so I was thinking of you as I was walking the floor at New York Comic Con, and obviously you know this, and listeners know this. I mean, pops are everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, really everywhere. I mean, there are some booths that just will have a few, but they still have them. And then other booths that are very much dedicated to them. I mean, how do you continue to stand out in such a crowded field? Is it bringing like a bigger space? Is it better deals? Is it more exclusives? Is it some combination? Like, what do you do?
I think it's definitely a combination. Look, I think like we have the biggest selection. Like even there might be, you know, and when I say there's people that are bigger than us, it's literally you can count them on one hand, but they're probably bigger than us in volume of transactions, maybe because they do a lot online, or that, you know, we don't really do a lot online. We're more like hands-on. So, but as far as shows go, there's nobody that has our selection or the size of our booth or the organization. Like that's one key thing that I think a lot of people, because it's just extra work. Like if you're not familiar with our booth, you know, we have like 7 different racks in a, you know, 20, 30 foot space, but they're organized, you know, all the Disneys together, the TVs together, DC, Marvel, so on and so forth. And, you know, a lot of other booths, they just throw everything up. And like, let's say you're looking for a Harry Potter pop, there's 30 of them, but they're behind something, or that one's 20 feet to the left and 20 feet. And nobody wants to, especially at a convention where your time is really valuable, nobody wants to sit there looking through everything or looking behind things. Things get damaged that way. So we're very organized. You know, if we have 10 Harry Potters, they're all right next to each other in order. They're, you know, never mind in their own section, you know, even the pops that are next. So I think that's one of the key things people always say. And I really like, the number one thing I appreciate is when people do notice that, they come in and they're like, yeah, I got to tell you, this is great. Like, this is the best booth I've ever been in. You know, those things mean a lot to us because it, you know, it takes us 5, 6, 7 hours to set up. And we probably could do it in like 3 hours if we half-assed it like everybody else. So I think that's one of the things, definitely selection. We tend to have everything as soon as it comes out, which is, you know, another huge job in and of itself. You know, people don't see the back end of like hunting some of this stuff down, or like working out a trade with someone, or, you know, I need these, but I owe you a favor now, so I have to give you the, you know, like all these things come into play to have this selection all the time and have everything in stock. So, you know, I think that's that. We try to be as fair as humanly possible on our prices. You know, it is a business at the end of the day, but when we can help people, we do, you know, and I think a lot of it really comes down to customer service. And I tell this, even, you know, it's funny because like you said, everybody sells pops, and even the other big, our direct competition, like it's funny, like at New York, for instance, like everybody kept coming to bring us pops that they wanted to sell, or said, oh, somebody told me you'd have it. And like all our main competitions actually sending people to us. And, you know, that's really cool. Like, I mean, I think that, you know, we're friendly enough that like, you know, people that have it doesn't help them at all to send them to us, but they still do. And I think that's cool. And I think, you know, it's just a customer service thing where we treat everybody well. You know, we'll take the time to talk to you, even if we've heard that question 5,000 times, or, you know, sometimes you get those customers, you know, from being in a comic store, you know, they can be very hard to deal with, but we still take the time to do it. And I think all those things combined is luckily what enables us to, you know, be as noticeable as we are. And, you know, we go back to a city, you know, we'll use Chicago as an example. Like people come up to us and they're like, oh, I bought from you last year, or I bought from you in, you know, Miami or something like that. They remember, and they're like, I come to you first. You have everything, and you've always treated me well. And, you know, that means a lot to us because at least people are noticing. And it, you know, some of the nights where it's like 4 a.m. and you've been like restocking, or you just got back from like 10 trips in a row, you're like, why am I doing this? This is insane. And those type of things, really, even like one person saying that, it makes you realize that somebody actually does notice and care. So it's pretty cool.
No, that is. And, you know, as a customer of Undiscovered Realm, I mean, I appreciate the organization, both at shows and at your store in White Plains. And, you know, the same principle holds true for comics, too, because, you know, we would always talk about this, like at shows where, you know, the vendors who had their books alphabetized, you know, it makes a huge difference. I mean, there's a lot to be said for the thrill of the hunt, but it's like, you know, you don't want to overdo it. Yeah. So sometimes, you know, you'll see vendors with just like random long boxes, and it's, you might find something great, but you kill your whole afternoon.
Yeah, like 2 boxes in, you're like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah. So no, I mean, that makes a big difference. One thing came up a few episodes ago. I had a couple of creators on the show, artists, and they were talking about again, like this idea of having a presence at shows and deciding which shows are worth it or not. And one of the things they brought up I thought was interesting, and I was curious to see how this plays out in your world, if at all. This idea that if people see you at the same shows like all the time, do you ever run that risk of them being like, well, like I don't need to get something from them now because they're always around?
Yeah, I think that definitely, like, obviously because we do all these shows, we become friends with a lot of the other vendors. It almost becomes like a little family, and you see not everybody's the same at every show, but a large, I'd say 80% might be the same type of vendor. And, you'll hear like, oh, my sales are going down or blah, 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 but they have a very unique item where like if somebody already bought it from you this year and they're seeing you for the 10th time, there's no incentive for them to buy it. And we're lucky in that our stock changes constantly just by nature of the beast. Like new stuff is coming out literally every week. There might be 10, 15 new things. And then, old stuff comes in and out, and, we get a lot of collections, and we're pretty well known for having higher end and rare stuff. So you could see us a week before and come back and we might have, 20% different stock. And so we're lucky in that respect, but that's definitely an issue for a lot of vendors for sure, especially if you're creating original stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then again, just, this number of shows, that you go to. I mean, I guess I kind of love to go through this process of, from deciding to go to a show to, the prep, enlisting help, renting the vans, like this, kind of this whole part. But as far as just like deciding on the show, and again, you were saying, maybe scaling back potentially the number of shows that you go to.
Yeah, well, you kind of, you figure out which ones work the best for you. And you might have a great show one year, and then the next year you could do half as well, and there's so many variables that you can't control. The guests, the temperature outside, if it's raining, if it's sunny, you can't do anything about those. But you still have a good idea what shows work really well for you, and, at the end of the day, it is a dollar and cents thing. There's some shows that even maybe you do a little less profit at, but you enjoy doing them, or they're close enough that it's, you have to. So all those things definitely go into it. If something's 20 minutes away and you might not make a ton on it, but hey, it's close to the store. You can advertise the store to people, or, it's your home customers, or, you have to have a showing because your competitors are going to, so sometimes that comes into play. But, a lot of it, I guess now is like we've been on the road for at least a few years, and we know what works for us and what doesn't. And, just because if we do a new show and it doesn't go super well, I can sometimes say, hey, I see the writing on the wall here, a couple little things. This is going to be a great show eventually, and you want to stick with it. We're also loyal guys, so there's the shows that you do because you know the person and they do a lot of hard work and you want to be there for them. So there's so many, variables and a lot of politics involved. But I think like the number one thing obviously is dollars and cents,
Right. Well, yeah, and that's definitely something that's come up in various episodes. Again, talking to retailer, talking to the creators, there is this cost benefit analysis, whether you're paying for a table in Artist Alley or you're paying for a booth on the floor. I mean, like at New York Comic Con, like what is that?
It's expensive. I mean, like it depends. Like, we have like 2.5 booths. I want to say it's around like $2,000 to $3,000 a booth. And then also things people don't realize, like, so for a normal show, we have like 4 people. For New York Comic Con, I think we have like 12 or 14 people working the entire time. And so we need to purchase additional badges, and like that alone was another $1,200. You know what I mean? Like, and then, luckily that's a closed show, but hotel and, food and gas and tolls and, tires and, you name it, just wear and tear. That stuff adds up really quickly. So you have to think about that. And I think a lot of vendors definitely don't, that it's just a day-to-day thing. They don't realize like, hey, I'm going to do this show and I'm going to make, whatever I make, but I just put, 3,000 miles on my vehicle, and, that adds up. And then eventually that's thousands of dollars in repairs. You have to factor that into each show too, So, there's a lot of stuff to think about.
Right. You mentioned, enlisting help. Our mutual friend, Brian O'Day.
Yeah. Well, he was just with us.
All right. But I heard he left you in the lurch with another show.
He did.
Which one was that?
I got to say, for New York Comic Con. The mother of all shows, He's a very loyal, loving guy, but his love for Conor McGregor, I think, surpasses all.
Yeah, he was in Vegas, right? For a fight that weekend?
Yep.
Yeah. Speaking of Brian, at the recent Alternate Realities dinner gathering, I was telling him about the Never Stop, Never Popping podcast, and he said, I really want to listen to that, but I don't want to pay for it. And before I could even respond, one of the other guys, Drew, he chimed in. He's like, well, that's a conundrum. So I don't know how Brian's going to work it out, but
I'm going to have to scrape that $2.
I know, but I'm glad that the interest is there at least, so we'll take that. But but I mean, is that something that you have to deal with? I mean, again, I know these friends and hopefully on the reliable side, but I mean, is that something where it's like it just kind of falls through?
Luckily, it hasn't happened too much. Like and again, I understand. Like people are doing us a favor half the time. Like they're doing a job, but like it's not the most glorious thing in the world. So I get it. I wouldn't hold that against anybody as long as we can fill the spot, and we did. So it's no big deal. But we've been lucky in that aspect. But I see like, there's a lot of vendor groups on Facebook or wherever, and people are always looking for help. Or some people like just get help from Craigslist locally, which I can't even imagine doing. But I remember like a month ago or 2 months ago, this guy's like, none of my help showed up. Like I have nobody. I kept and I'm like, what do you do? Like that's insane to me. So we're really lucky in that regard, I think. We haven't had a lot of issues that probably, if you talk to any other vendor, they probably have a lot of.
Right. So there was one convention that you posted about a little while back. I'm trying to find it through all the screenshots when I went through all your stuff. I don't know offhand which convention this was, specifically. And again, not to harp on the negative experiences, but I was just kind of curious because, this is the sort of thing like I'm sure like this was, this was like a fire raging within you as you post. And now some time has passed.
Yeah, I don't remember a lot of these things. So yeah, have at it.
But you said suffered our biggest losses ever at the show this weekend, as did many others. You had some FedEx issues going on at the same time. This weekend really made me question doing shows. It's so disheartening to have weeks and even months of hard work, stress, being away, and more just vanish into thin air from things out of your control. I had multiple vendors tell me today they may hang it up or ask if we wanted to buy them out. So what was going on there?
All right. I have to preface this with like, so this was a show in Philly, and it was run by Reed Pop, who I love dearly. Honestly, they run the best shows in the country. I've never had a problem. All of my favorite shows are run by Reed Pop. And this one was just an anomaly. I don't know what happened, and it was not their fault whatsoever, but it was just the biggest mismatch of problems I've ever seen in my life. And, going back to what I said before, where like, you could have literally the worst show of your entire history, but you can see the writing on the wall. Obviously, eventually it's going to be a good thing. And that's a perfect example of something like that. I love the people that do it. They obviously have the best pedigree in the business, and the potential's there. So that being said, just nobody showed up, but they had great programming. They had great guests. It was in a big city. I think the biggest problem was it was 3 weeks before New York Comic Con.
So this was the new show that they started this year, Keystone.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And again, I really don't want to come off like I'm, talking bad about it, because it really wasn't their fault. And obviously, they suffered more than anybody, and you couldn't pay me enough money to be a staff member in that building that weekend. I've never experienced anything like that. And
why people complaining about it?
Oh my God. I mean, I honestly, I thought it was going to get violent at a certain point. Like people were, because you got to remember, like people were literally losing their ass. Like it wasn't pretty. And then to make it worse, the union, this is something that a lot of people don't realize, like, the union was being ridiculous there, and they were charging people to load in, load out, like $1.50 per pound. If you even had a commercial plate, like a rental van, like you had to pay. So people were getting bills for $5,000-$10,000 just to load in, never mind load out. Now factor in a weekend where everybody's, not in the best of moods, and they're all commiserating together. And then I thought during load out, the cops were coming, it was getting to that level. Yeah. And again, not any fault of the showrunners, because they didn't do anything either. The union just really turned the screws to them for whatever reason. I don't know, but I have to give them credit where I don't know what they did, whether they picked up an insane bill, they covered the loadout costs, and, really saved a day at the end of the show and made a really potentially bad situation good. And my hats are off. And I said this after the fact too, like, the staff did a great job, and they really weathered probably the worst storm they ever will. But sometimes these things happen, and that's probably the worst case of it. But I mean, we lost a lot of money there, and thank God New York Comic Con was right afterwards, because that's your biggest show of the year. Same company though, so this might we talk 5 years from now, that show might be just as big. It has the potential.
Right. Well, I know, and that's especially you don't know which way that's going to go, right, with a new show.
Of course, and they did everything right. I really, I don't know. Sometimes you can do everything right. You know, we all know this in life.
Yeah.
And things just don't work out.
It's tough. I mean, like you said, the fact that it was so close to New York
Yeah, I
Comic
think
Con,
that
I'm
was
sure
definitely
that
a red
didn't
flag,
help.
yeah.
I mean, look, this, and I know you've heard a bunch of the episodes. I mean, this has been something that's been coming up, and I've been asking people about it because you hear a lot of people, and fans especially, but you hear from, you know, different areas about there being too many shows. And I mean, maybe that could be an example of, you know, just there not being enough.
It could be,
interest.
but you know, like I think like if they put that show on in March, it'd be one of the biggest shows of the year. I really do. It's the right place. It's just not the right time. That's it. People, New York is, even from as a vendor, New York Comic Con is just so big and you have people coming from everywhere. People save up all year. It's like they have an allowance for that show. And as a vendor, you can tell it's like people come, they have their however much money in their pocket. And like on Sunday, they're like, I saved for this show. I have to spend it. Like, let me find something to buy. That doesn't happen at any other show. So, you know, for that, you're asking people to like dip into that money, you know, that they're in their mind. They're like, all right, I'm dedicated to New York. I'm dedicated to New York. And I think that's all it was. And I think, you know, they will have a super successful show as time goes on.
So when you wrote about, you know, questioning doing these shows, I mean, was that something that passed once things settled down?
No, it did. But look, you know, there's a lot of good to doing all this, but there's really a lot of bad too. You're on the road. You're away from your family. You're away from your friends. Luckily, we get to bring some of them with us. But, you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of stress. You could go into a show, you know, and it could have been your best show of the year before, and you could end up losing money. You don't know. Like, there's just so many factors. So, you know, it's already highly stressful. And, you know, sometimes you figure these shows are safe. Like, oh, this is one of the big ones. Like, there's no way it's going to go south. And then it does. And you're counting on that, you know, pay your mortgage or your bills or pay a vendor to get your stock, especially right before New York. Like, people were probably going to take that money and reinvest it to stock up, you know. So now only are you're not making money there and losing money, but you're losing more money because you didn't have the product to sell at the other show. And, you know, there's so many things that go into it. So when something like that happens, it's almost like a punch in the gut. And then again, you have all these guys like, you know, that normally you see your vendor friends at every show, but when it's slow like that, everybody's just kind of wandering around and you have groups of 10 people just all bitching to each other, and it gets toxic really quickly.
Right.
So, you know, it's hard not to really feel down on yourself, you know, or not even just yourself, just in general, you know. And, you know, you could say like, oh, the company loses a shit ton more than anybody else, you know, but
They can absorb it better than a mom and pop shop.
You're out of business, you know, and it's hard, you know. So of course tempers are going to flare, you know.
Yeah. When you say that, you know, some vendors approached you about buying them out, have you bought out any other vendors or seriously thought about it?
I mean, you know, everyone jokes all the time, like, oh, yeah, when are you going to buy me out so I can stop doing this, you know? You know, you never like I mean, yeah, it does happen. Somebody goes out and they're like, hey, I'll sell you everything. Not often, but what happens a lot at a slow show is the guy with the biggest wallet in the room absorbs. So like you have the small guys who legitimately like I'm not exaggerating when I say maybe they don't have the gas money to get back home because they just made no money. So they need to sell stuff at cost, below cost, just to recoup their money, just to get home, you know, so they're taking their loss. So if you know, yeah, you lost a lot of money that weekend, but maybe you still have it. You know, you have New York coming up. If some guy's like, all right, I have these pops, you know, they cost $7 at wholesale. I'm selling them for $4. It's half the price for you to buy from them than to go from Funko directly. So, you know, even though you just lost a bunch of money, you buy that stuff at half price and then you resell that, it helps offset your losses. And that's what happens a lot. The guys with the money start shopping and, you know, it ends up, you have to find your silver linings, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's actually something that I was going to ask. I mean, to what extent are you viewing these shows as an opportunity to acquire?
Oh, I mean, there's some shows, you know, people say it all the time, well, that's a buying show, or, you know, that's a dump show, like I'm just dumping dead stock, or not us necessarily, but, you know, that happens a lot with like books and stuff like that. People like, I just go to dump all my dead product there. Or, you know, I'm just going there to buy from other vendors, you know, like a lot of the smaller shows are good for that because you get like, for instance, like the Rhode Island last year, or Boston rather, there was a vendor who sells pops, but that's the only show he does all year. So whatever stock he had the year before, he just threw back in storage or whatever it was, and then he brings it back out. He did not bother checking the pricing on things. Stuff that was $10 then is now $50, $60, $80, $100. Like almost his entire booth was situations like this. So you walk over there before the show even opens and you're like, I'll literally take your entire booth. Like, that's it. And, you know, so he sold like almost all his stock before the doors even opened, you know, and he's happy. But, you know, you could have made so much more money, you know. So those things do happen. So you start to learn where these shows are that just kind of have like a really, for some reason, like New England is a lot like that, where the people don't leave New England, like the vendors. They just kind of, you know, Boston, Rhode Island, things like that. So you learn these shows, and you might go there even if you break even. You're buying your stock for the bigger shows so you can make your money then. So
Right.
yeah, it happens.
I mean, any moral hesitation about something
definitely.
like that?
I mean, I'm probably the like.
I'm not saying you should necessarily.
No.
I'm just curious if
I'm
you do.
like the wrong person to ask about that, because I will definitely buy stuff off people when it's underpriced, especially if it's somebody that like I know I'm never going to see again. But more often than not, I say, hey, you know, you're way underpriced on this. Like it happened at Rhode Island. There was a guy right next to us, and he had Supernatural car with a Dean in it or whatever.
I still haven't picked that up.
Yeah, so they were rotting away for like $50. You know, he had it out for $100, and I was like, you know, there's like $300 now. And he's like, really? And he's like, I'll sell them all to you for $100. I was like, I'll tell you what, like, put them out for $200. You're still giving somebody a crazy deal. If you have it left at the end of the weekend, we'll buy all of them for $100 each. And he was like, okay. And whatever he had left, he sold us. But we told, I could have just bought them right there. But like, you know, I could tell it's a guy, you know, it's the only show he's doing. You're not going to rip him off. And I think that's one of the things that has helped us have all these other vendors look out for us too and send business to us, because we'll go there and I'll say, hey, you know, that's doubled since last month. You should really raise that up, blah, 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 blah. And we all help each other, and it's become a little family, and it's nice.
Yeah.
know?
Well, I guess, you know, in terms of why you do these shows, right? I mean, and you've already laid out, I think, pretty much all the major reasons. I mean, you go to these shows, you're moving product, you're, raising awareness of the brand of the store. You have an online business, right? So people can find you online, and you'll ship stuff to them, potentially acquiring, new pieces. I mean, is there anything
we buy
else?
collections too. No, I mean, it's a mismatch of all those things, honestly. Like I said, each show has its own reasons for doing it, but at the end of the day, all those things come into play. Obviously, the further away you are, you're not really going to have somebody from Chicago show up to your store. But hey, people come to New York all the time, right? You tell them, hey, it's a 20-minute ride from Grand Central. If you're ever in the area, stop in. And it does happen.
Yeah.
Somebody was doing a road trip Monday, and they called up and they're like, hey, are you guys open? And we're usually not on Mondays, but we were there, restocking from Rhode Island, and they stopped on by like on their road trip. They were driving 7 hours, So these things do happen, and people, definitely remember you. So you do them for all those reasons.
Right. All right. So, you're deciding which shows to do. And again, those are some of the reasons why you might choose to go to a particular show. And of course, you have your experience from the ones that you've gone to. And so,
Sure.
you make the decision to go to a show. You're enlisting help. Right. And I want to get into the vans and, the load in process.
Sure.
So that's something I have no experience with.
Every show is a different beast.
Talk to me about the vans first. What do you have any? Do you have?
Yeah, we own our own van,
Okay.
Cargo van and a trailer. That's usually okay. But then there's certain shows. We use New York Comic Con, for example. It's one of the few shows where the union at the Javits Center is extremely strict. So if you come in a box truck or a rider truck or a trailer, anything that's bigger than like a regular old van, you have to pay. And it's around, I think, $1.50 or $1.75 per pound that you unload. So they can get insane really fast.
And so they're weighing everything.
So they weigh that. Basically, if you come in a trailer, they weigh it.
Okay.
And then you unload, and then they weigh it.
Got it. Okay.
And that's how they do it. And so it gets crazy. But if you come in vans, the show or whatever deal they've worked out, Repop, they offset the cost. So they don't charge you. You unload everything onto a pallet real quick, and they forklift it to your booth. And that's how they have to load so many vendors into a show like that. That's the way it keeps moving quickly.
Where does the van go after?
So usually there's a lot, but some places like New York City, DC is the absolute worst. There's no outdoor lots, especially for a van and a trailer. It's just ridiculous. Luckily, we're from New York, so we actually, I pay an extra person to drive the van, and they take it back to the house, unhitch the trailer, and then come back with the van again.
Okay.
But we can't use the trailer for New York Comic Con because of the cost. So we have to rent vans. And for us to fit our racks in there, we can only use the vans with the really high tops. And a lot of the rental places only have maybe one of those, and they're booked like for a month at a time, 2 months at a time, because other people are doing similar things. So like finding one is a nightmare. Then you Enterprise telling you they're going to have this van, and you show up and they have a smaller one, you're literally screwed. Like it's going to cost you $5,000-$6,000 now to load into New York Comic Con. And it's crazy. And these are the things like nobody ever thinks about or sees, you know?
It's crazy.
Oh, I know. And that's one of the few shows where like maybe you suck it up and, you know, absorb it because that's how big that show is. But there's no other show in the country, I think, that you would do that. And, you know, some shows you just pull right up, like, you know, one of the things I like about Wizard World, they get a lot of crap, but like you literally can drive up to your booth at almost, depending on the convention center, but most of them I can park right next to my booth and unload everything. It saves us hours of work and stress and headaches. And then some of them you have to load in from like, you know, 2 blocks away and roll everything through the whole convention center. Some of them, you know, you're right by the door. You know, literally every show is a unique situation.
Okay.
Parking, maybe the loading dock only has three spots to load in, you know, so you have to wait for everybody to finish before the next ones come in. Or maybe they have tons of them and it's quick, you know, like Raleigh. I love that show. The loading dock gets full really quick. So the line's like 7 blocks long. It'll take you 4 hours just to get in before you can start to fill your van up, you know, and nobody sees this stuff. You know, they come to the show and they leave and they don't realize like this, you know, there's a whole world going on afterwards and before.
Because, you know, the only experience I have with this alternate reality setup at a convention at the Westchester County Center, like a year or two before we closed.
And that's one of the easiest ones, honestly.
Yeah. And so that's my only experience being on that side. And it was, you know, a small show and we didn't have that much stuff. Like it was, you know, again, we parked, brought the stuff and that was it. But I mean, this is really crazy to me. And so, you know, again, I know it depends on the show, but I mean, typically how early... How far in advance of the show are you able to load in? Like for New York, it's days before, right?
New York, they start 2 days before.
Yeah.
But the way they do it, so for us, we can't load until the day before because they don't set up the back half. We're on the back wall. Yeah. So they don't set up that back area so that everybody else can load in and use that as like a staging area. And then they get to set up. So if you're in the front or the middle, you can start setting up 2 days before. For us, there's no space back there. They're using it for storage and everything until the day before. So then we set that up. So typically it's the day before. Some really small shows, you set up that morning. We can't, like for somebody with our size setup, it's impossible. But, you know, like, you know, more like local shows and things like that, sometimes you would set up at like, you know, 6 to 10 in the morning or something like that. And then the show opens, you know. But typically, you know, I would say like 8 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m. is your typical load-in window. Some shows, I love it when it's like, you know, 11 or 12 to 10 or something like that because you actually get to sleep a little bit. You don't want to be like, because a lot of times you're driving in the night before or that morning. We always come the night before. Like I don't want to drive 4 hours and then unload a show. But a lot of people either can't get off of work because this is not their main thing, or they can't afford another night in the hotel. That comes right out of your profits. So they drive in, you know, that morning and then they go right to load-in. And, you know, so the later one's definitely preferable for a million reasons, you know, so you really learn the ropes real quick. And it's one of the good things, like I said, there's a lot of Facebook groups and stuff like that. So everybody talks to each other. Hey, I'm doing this show for the first time. Like, what should I know? How's parking? Do you have an idea for a good hotel? And that's the other thing for us because of the trailer. I have to look. Sometimes it takes me like 4, 5, 6 hours to book a hotel because I need to make sure they have a big open lot. And even if they have an open lot, you know, you pull the trailer in and you wake up the next morning, the lot's full and there's no room to get out. That's happened to us. It's it's a nightmare. Like I can't even begin to tell you. But after you've done it for a year or two, now you book the same hotel. You already know this is where we go. This is where the parking lot is. So it becomes a little easier. But when you're first starting out, man, trial and error doesn't even begin to sum it up.
Yeah, I mean, no, I would imagine that must be so challenging, and especially if, again, you don't know what to expect. And, you know, in a case like, you know, some of those costs, those numbers that you're telling me.
Yeah, no, it can be astronomical.
It's so high that, I mean, you know, depending on the show and depending on your situation, might be the kind of thing where you turn around and go.
Oh, people were like almost going to do that at the last one where that problem was happening. People were like, all right, I'm out. And then, you know.
So tell me, just lay that out for me one more time, because I'm still processing all of this about the, so I guess that was at the Philly show, right?
Yeah.
With the, so you were in a van. I'm looking at your post.
Yeah. No, so for that show in particular, I knew ahead of time. I looked at the, you know, the package that they send you saying load in rules, blah, 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 blah. Said, no trailers. You know, they're going to charge for trailers. And, you know, that's typical. So we rented a van, but because it had commercial plates, they would not let you drive onto the floor. You had to go outside and you had to pay to unload. But like that is not typical at all. You know, and every rental van has commercial plates. That's just how it is. There's no, you know, and even if we personally owned it, it could still have commercial plates. So it was crazy. Like that's why people were literally getting in shouting matches.
So
like,
this was 7,000?
I think something like that is what it would have been. Yeah. Yeah. So Now imagine that's before the show starts. So now
Right.
you're thinking, all right, well, maybe we're gonna have a really, really, really good show. And there's almost no show on the planet that you could absorb that cost. I don't,
Right.
like nothing almost. And then you have a subpar show that you don't make anything at, and then they nail you loading out. Like people were making plans because they were like, all right, I'm gonna drive onto the dock. They're like, well, you're going to get towed. You can't do that, blah, blah, blah. So other vendors were talking to each other. All right, I'm going to park this way. You can't tow a van from behind from the front. So you have to do it from behind. So they were like planning to park nose to nose so that like even if the cops came, they couldn't tow. Like I'm telling you, it was like Lord of the Flies. I can't believe that everything went off without a hitch. And yeah, I got to give props like once again to the team behind it because they handled a bad situation and they really took care of it. But
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that.
And so you didn't pay the $7,000.
No.
How did you not have to pay? Sorry if I
So
missed
we
that.
got really lucky, and I was raising a stink outside, not with the show, but because I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like this is my van,
Right.
And they're like, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna just go home because we will lose money. Like we can't do this. And one of the guys that works there was like, just come with me, and he like brought us there. He's like, you have 15 minutes, and he brought us to some side entrance, and we just unloaded as fast as we ever have, and we got in. But that's us, for some other person who maybe just walked away with their tail between their legs, they got hit. But luckily at the end, I don't know what got worked out, but I said like Reed Pop absorbed the cost or something. I don't even want to know what that bill
Right.
looked like. So props to them. And everybody got out and licked their wounds and, slept it off. But yeah, I've never seen anything like that. I hope I never do again for everybody's sake. It's crazy.
And how many pops or boxes of pops are you bringing to these shows typically?
Thousands of pops, thousands and thousands. I don't know. So how we have our racks. Like this might not make sense to some people out there, but we have these huge racks. So after New York, we sold so much stuff that there's so many holes. So we go back to the store, we look at the pictures of what's missing, we go through our back stock and we pull them. But those racks are packed away in the trailer. So we put them all in moving boxes to then put back on the shelf. But now that adds like 8 giant moving boxes that we don't normally travel with, which was part of the problem for this last one.
Okay.
And so we have to put all that back on. So it really varies show to show. But, we brought like twice as much stuff as we normally would have had to travel with because of New York. So you really have to think about that too. Next year, Emerald City, C2E2, and like one of the other shows we do in Ohio, they're all back to back. So like if we were to do them, we would have to you would run out of stock. You can't fit it all. So we would have to have somebody like drive from New York to Chicago to meet us after one of them to just have restock. And like, it's just a logistical nightmare.
Are you thinking about Emerald City? Because I know that's farther west than you've ever gone.
We've never gone past Chicago. And I really want to do it, especially that's like Funko's hometown. It's a big pop city and it's a really great show. And it's another Reed Pop show. I would keep bringing them up, but I love their shows.
They run a lot of big shows.
Yeah. And I really, truly do love their shows, and I would love to get into that one. And I was ready to try, but we can't because I love C2E2. We've been over this. This is my favorite show of the year. It would be diminishing returns. We'd go there, run out of most of our stuff, and then go to Chicago, and, why are we even there?
Right.
So it's hard.
Well, you say get in, right? So it's not a guarantee that you're going to get space
especially
at
those
these
big shows. I mean, like, there's waiting lists for years sometimes. Somebody has to like die or just go out of business for you to get in. It's crazy.
I mean, I guess part of it, right, is like limited space. And then also, I'm assuming, well, maybe you could probably speak to this from your experience running your own show, even though we'll mostly save that for our after show that we're going to do.
Sure.
But, I'm assuming that there's some kind of consideration. You don't want too many of the same types of vendors.
Well, yeah, a good show will definitely vet that type of thing and not stick people next to each other. And, that's a large part of it. Like, even from my own experience, like you were saying, like when we do the floor plan, like if we have 2 t-shirt vendors, we're not going to take on it. Even if we have booths to sell, it's just not good for anybody. Like, we want everybody to make money, and, it's bad for the show. You're going to lose those vendors over time. So a great show will say, hey, we have too much of this, sorry. And they'll vet it. Sometimes, though, it's just a first come, first serve. And if, like, we'll say pops, like if there's 50 booths and 50 pop vendors sign up first, guess what? Although these days every booth seems to just be a pop booth. But that's its own thing.
Any bitterness toward that?
Oh, no, I get it. But, like, it weeds itself out. The cream rises to the top.
That's true. But, you've seen it, right? Like, I'm sure over these years, how many years now have you been doing this?
I think we've been, like, heavily doing shows for about 3 years. So it's not been super long, but it feels like decades. Honestly, it really does. Like, I know enough that, like, I feel like I'm, and I love talking to people. That's why I'm enjoying this conversation so much, because a lot of this stuff doesn't get talked about. And, these are all questions that really, if as a new vendor, I could have talked to somebody and just said, all right, how does this work? How does this work? It would have been a life changer and saved a year and a half of just work and losses and, expense.
Yeah.
So
no, it's listen. This season has been very educational for me. It's like I love to I love to talk to the comic shop retailers, but I've lived in that world, so it's like I know the answers to a lot of the questions that I'm going to ask. Whereas with this season, it's been very different, and I've enjoyed that aspect of it.
You're a listener. That's good.
Yeah, when you have so much of the product at the shows, especially like if it's an especially busy time and or big shows. I mean, does it hurt the store at all to not have some of those things in stock?
Yeah, I mean, that's another really interesting layer to everything. Some people just go show to show. They don't really have. Most people don't have stores, honestly. But yeah, so we try to keep like today we got a new shipment of a bunch of stuff in. So my partner Ralph, he called me up. He said, "All right, what do you want for the show next week? What do you want?" So we pull 3. Our shelf holds 3, so we pull 3 for the store, 3 for the show right off the bat, just to put out. Then it's back stock. If we get 30 of something, all right, do you do 15 and 15? No, we're going to sell a lot more at the show than we will in the store. So maybe we do like 12 and 24, Or maybe there's a big Harry Potter guest and we got a bunch of Harry Potter pops in. So you're going to sell more of those. So you're going to take, every show is its own unique beast. And, this takes days. Like, all right, we need to pull this. We need to pull that. Oh, we're out of this one. Now we got to go dig through and find, like, nobody realizes how much headache and work that is. It's crazy. And the formula does not flow from one show to another whatsoever. Every single show is a unique beast. And that's another thing, like as you do these shows over and over again, there's some weird anomalies to it. Like people in Chicago may really, really like this one product that like you barely sell at the other shows. But, after you do it 2 times and you realize it's consistent, you're like, all right, well, we got to stock up on anime pops or whatever, whatever it is. They really like that there,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Are there any specific examples that come to mind of things like that?
No, not particularly. Like, I don't know. Like a lot of the things for us anyway that sell are popular across the board.
Right.
But there definitely are some shows where like we'll sell a ton of Star Wars stuff, like for no apparent reason, like certain cities, and then like you'll barely sell any for like the next month and a half. And you might sell 0 of a pop at one show, and then the next week you sell like 30 of them. And why? I don't know. It's just weird. And I noticed something in like Chicago. There's like no Hot Topics around really for some reason, or they're all in the outskirts, so they're not in the main city. So Hot Topic stuff, exclusives and things like that, fly because these people are not seeing them. Whereas here, you can drive the 5 Hot Topics within 15 minutes. So it's whatever. I have a million of these, So those things come into play too. You got to know, okay, we better stock up on the Hot Topic stuff because we're going to Chicago. It's weird.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this cost-benefit analysis. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, the majority of shows that you're doing, are they profitable for you?
Yeah, but it's really deceiving. And this is one thing that comes up in these vendor groups a lot, too. It's like, how much did you make? Or like, blah, blah, blah. If we make, I'm just using fake numbers here. Sorry, I keep coughing. Let's say we make $20,000 at a show, and another vendor makes $5,000. But we're making $1 per product, and they're making like 5,000% profit. That 5,000 could be like us making 100.
Right.
So it's really, there's no rhyme or reason to it. You cannot compare things whatsoever. Or, so you hope to make profit, but like you could literally do a $20,000 show, and depending where it is and, how much the hotels are and travel and blah, blah, you could end up coming home with $1,000 in profit, like after recouping product and things like that. And sometimes that's okay. Like if you have a huge order coming in that you have to pay for in 2 weeks, even if you go there and you break even or you maybe make a little less, getting that cash flow back and moving the product, these things all really, and that happens a lot. I don't care who's going to tell you otherwise. Like 90% of this is cash flow. If you could just sell everything and, pay for your orders and things like, people wouldn't do half of the work that they do.
I mean, that does make sense. And obviously, you're a smart guy, so it's like I'm assuming you wouldn't keep doing these shows if they were
huge but
losses.
There's a lot of things you have to calculate, because you can look at it as, and some people do, and obviously there's nothing wrong with that. You should be looking at your profit and loss, but there's so many other variables to it. Like, is this a show where we typically get a lot of collections in? Because now you're spending money, but you're going to make that tenfold over time, as you resell this stuff. So even if it's a bad show, sometimes, you might still do it because of those things, and you can't really factor that into, a pure, profit and loss statement. Yeah. So there's so many variables.
Yeah, and then how does that intersect with the personal side of all of this? Because again, it's like you are away from home, you're away
Yeah.
from your
No,
wife,
it's
you're away
hard.
from your dog, you're
No,
away from
no.
your other businesses.
It's really hard. I'm lucky. I don't have kids yet, and I want to have kids. But I think about that all the time. Like, how am I going to make this work? Things like that. I miss my wife. I miss my dogs. It's hard. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's pretty hard. As much work as it is, sometimes it's fun being on the road. I say it all the time. It's like being in a band, except you're like you're the roadie, you're the manager, you're the tour manager, you're the booking agent, you're everything, and there's none of the fun parts.
Right.
It's just all work, and there's a lot of overlap to that. Some people, they don't even have places. They just go from show to show to show, and you live in hotels most of your life.
Well, I know you've said in past episode that if you weren't married, you might not have like your own place because you're on the road so much.
Yeah, I mean, and that might make it easier sometimes in a way, because not just because like your wife's upset that you're not home or you miss her or something like that, but like you could just hang out in those cities, because half the time we could go to the best city in the world and you would never know it, because all you see is inside of a convention center and your bed,
right,
and the trailer, and that's it. You could be anywhere in the world. It doesn't make a difference. So the people that are going show to show, they're getting a couple days to like go see the city, explore things. We don't get to do that at all. Also, we have to come back to the stores and restock, and we still have like businesses to run. You can do a lot, luckily these days, on your phone and your computer, but sometimes you physically got to be there. And so that comes into play a lot. And I think it would be a lot easier if those things didn't exist. Yeah, it might be a lot more fun. I don't know.
Speaking of this, the travel side of all this,
Yeah.
if anyone wants to hear more specifically about that aspect of it, we did an episode last year with comic book creator Greg Schiegel, and that's available under the main My Comic Shop history feed. It's a Beyond My Comic Shop installment where we really talked about, again, just like exploring these different places when you have the opportunity to, food that you like to check out when you're there. So if anyone wants a little bit more on that front, that's out there too. Because I know that's a whole other side of this.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many variables to it. Like Florida, like those shows are the ones that we do anyway, are pretty good shows. But like, even if they were okay, it's like I might break even on this show, but I'm in Florida. A lot of people use it as an excuse. They bring their family with them. They go to Disney World. They go to Universal. They use that as a vacation because you're already absorbing the travel costs by going to the show. Mm-hmm. So there's certain things like where you don't mind going to these places. Where if it's like in the middle of nowhere, you're like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. I put the call out on Facebook. I said, if anyone has, is there anything that we haven't touched on yet this season that, that you wanted to hear about? And a couple of people brought up this phenomenon of con crud, where, it's not uncommon to come out of these shows under the weather. Is that something you've experienced
it's really
a lot?
common.
I know you swear by emergency.
I do like that stuff. Yeah. I mean, in the past, it's definitely helped for me. People say it's a placebo. I don't know. It works, so I don't care. I've been really lucky in that I don't get con crud that much, where other people get it all the time. So, I mean, there's, some people just have low immune systems. But, like, we had this discussion this weekend, actually, because Brian O'Day, he was like, I need to go get Purell somewhere, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I hate using that because, obviously at the end of the day, I wash my hands.
Right.
But, like, I think that the people that are constantly Purelling are the ones who are getting sick all the time because you're just not getting used to it. And I really, truly, I might just be making this up, but I never get sick. And, like, I'm dealing, neither does Carlos, really. And he's, like, my main guy. And we're always dealing with people and money and boxes and the dirtiest of things. Like, and we never get sick. And I think our immune systems have just built up so much from dealing with it all.
So my wife and I have had this conversation because I'm in the O'Day category where I'm Purelling all the time. I think I've rubbed off on my wife in that respect, but I think left to her own devices, I don't think she would use it quite as much as I do. My thing is, I guess I am a little bit of a germaphobe, and my day job, I'm in law school admissions, and so I'm going to a lot of these recruitment events. I'm standing behind a table, like I'm shaking hands over and over, and it's like all I want to do is wash my hands. The thing that I especially can't do, it's like I can't touch my face and I can't eat if I haven't washed my hands. That is like an absolute. But even if I'm not doing that, like I still can only go so long before needing to.
I'm lucky that it doesn't bother me. Like, obviously,
sanitize.
like I say this all the time. My favorite thing is I know the day's over. I go wash my hands, and it's crazy, just like the dirt that comes off your hands, just from you're not even doing anything, just from touching things all day. And but yeah, I really do think I talk to a lot of like handlers and guests and things like that, and it's divided too. Like half of them, after every guest, they got this mega bottle of Purell and they wipe their hands after every guest. And then some of the other ones are like, nope, I don't do that. I never get sick. they always get sick. So I'm in that camp, and it's weird. Like, it's divided across the board, you know?
I know, it's interesting. I know. I do think there's something to, your theory about this, though, and you probably shouldn't overdo it. I think about this, too. Like, we don't have kids yet, but that's on the horizon, and it's like...
Oh, yeah, you're going to get sick all the time.
We're going to get sick, but also it's like, the child needs to be exposed to germs.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's going to be hard for me to not make the kid wash their hands like every second.
No, I know. You got to... It's a mental thing. I mean, that's all it is, Everybody's different, but... I don't know. It works for me, and I very rarely get sick. Or if I do, I get really sick for like 3 days, and then I'm good, for the rest of the year. So,
to what extent are you enjoying these conventions / experiencing them as a fan? Because like I see you post photos, like you met one of the actors from Stranger Things most recently, right? And you got him to sign.
Yeah.
Pop.
So that's like, I don't know. As a collector, we're all collectors too. You know what I mean? Like, the thrill of the hunt is still a thing. It's definitely desensitizing. Like, we had this conversation. Somebody was like, "Oh, why don't you come out to this show?" And I'm like, we're doing so many shows. Like, last thing I want to even think about is going to another show.
Do you ever go to a show just on your own?
Almost never. It would have to be something really special. Like, there's a Ghostbusters one next year, which I'm very much looking forward to. But it would have to be something like that. That's like a one-time, like... But yeah, you really get desensitized to it. And this came up because of Halloween, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Everyone's dressed up. But like, all I see is people dressed up every weekend. Like, it just feels like another day. You don't even think about it.
Yeah.
We're loading up the van, and there's a million kids running around in costumes, and it doesn't feel any different than a Saturday. So yeah, you do experience and get to enjoy it sometimes. And that's one of the little perks, is you do run into like celebrities or guests or things like that. And sometimes you see them on a regular basis, and it's kind of cool. I'm personally trying to assemble a fully signed Stranger Things set, like of all the characters. So I just like, the collector in me likes having that goal. Like, like, this is the thing. You always have to have something.
Yeah, that gives that motivation.
Once you get everything, you're like, it really does lose a lot of its appeal. Like, so it's nice, like, piecing those things together. And then there's the hard ones, like Winona Ryder. Like, that's like the grail, like, where am I getting that? So she doesn't do shows, but I will get it eventually. Like, I just got to put in the work.
Yeah. But yeah, so you met Will, right?
Yeah, and he was, and it's funny because he lives in Scarsdale, which is like 5 minutes from where we're recording right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so it's funny. He's been like really kind of hard to get. Like, I just keep missing them like 2 ships in the night, and I see the other ones all the time. So it was nice to finally get that one. And Hopper too. That was a nice one to check off.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
So like for that, I mean, do you have any special access by virtue of being a vendor? Like
sometimes.
Yeah.
It again varies show to show. Like, and some promoters will, let you do it for free, which is really nice and appreciated. And sometimes you got to pay. Sometimes, there's a lot and everything in between, sometimes you get to come in before the line starts, which is really great. Some shows, if you're a vendor, they treat you like a VIP pass. So you still have to wait, not with the regular crowd, but at the back of the VIP line, because those people paid extra to be first, and it's not fair for the vendors to jump that. But they do understand you got to get back to your booth, you're trying to sell stuff. So really, show to show, every different avenue is a possibility. Like, you might have to wait in the whole line, you might get in before the show opens, you might wait at the back of the VIP. There's a million variables. But
so you're able to get out from the booth at least a little bit? Or you have agents sometimes who will go hunt stuff
Sometimes
for
I
you?
do that, but I like to do a lap around for a couple of reasons. One, I do know all these people. And one of the things that really does keep me going, and I think about, like, all right, if I just stop doing this tomorrow, like, I would miss probably most of all seeing all the other vendors that I've become friends with. And it is like a family. And I really do look forward to that. And we go out to dinner together, we catch up, I really, truly, that's probably my favorite part of all this. And so I like to at least go say hi. And sometimes it's hard because I just want to walk the show floor, and you're stopping at every booth for 30 minutes to catch up on life with somebody. But I also like to see if there's any deals to be had, or like if any of those rare things are floating around, before the show gets going and everybody's in there. So I try to do it at least then. Some shows, like New York Comic Con, if you even want to go use the bathroom, you're out. Like, it's not happening.
Oh,
like,
it's
that crazy.
Day.
Exactly. Yeah. And you just can't physically move out of that booth. But then sometimes it's a little slower. There's lulls, and you learn when you can get out for a little bit. But it is nice. It's to breathe for a second.
Yeah. I mean, that's something to think about, right? Like, if you're a vendor at New York Comic Con, you can't go to the bathroom.
No, people don't realize. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, on the back wall, you used to be able to get to the loading dock. You would just see, like, cups with pee in them and stuff like that, because people are, like, just literally going back there. It is that crazy that even if there was no line for the bathroom, just leaving the booth, you could lose, like, hundreds of dollars. Now, factor in, like, the line's, like, 3 hours long because there's thousands of people. It's just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, no, that's as far as the physical toll. I mean, we talked about the con crud, but I mean, just the stamina that you need. And again,
it
it's
takes
not,
its toll.
as we've discussed, like it's not just the days of the show itself, it's the pre and post.
Yeah, so by the time you get to the show, you've already been like killing yourself for 3 days, maybe, you know, loading heavy stuff and carrying it
Potentially a long
downstairs and
drive,
upstairs.
like when you're driving to Chicago.
Yeah, it's hard, you know, and you start to get tired, and you got to be careful. You are lugging like 10,000 pounds behind you, you know, like it's dangerous. Like, one of the only, I always drive with everybody. Like, I'm not one of those guys that's just like, all right, I'll see you later. But for some business reason, I had to fly to Florida. So I flew back, and they ended up hitting a deer on the way back. And that's never happened. Knock on wood, we've had no accidents, no problem. We've been, you know, we've had some mechanical issues and things like that, but we've been very lucky. And that's scary, you know, like, you know, you're dealing with so much driving that you open yourself up to having these problems. So I had just gotten home. I was exhausted. I literally, I'm telling you, 30 seconds, I closed my eyes. I was like, oh, I'm so happy to be home and finally falling asleep. My phone rings. It's like 3:30 in the morning. They're like, oh, we just hit a deer. The car won't move, you know, and they're in rural Virginia or something. It's 4 a.m. Nothing's open. There's no lights on the road. And, you know, they're not used to this.
Right.
So the girl that was driving's freaking out because she just, you know, totaled the car almost.
Sure, it's unsettling.
Yeah. So these things happen, you know, and you do get tired, you know, and you got to be smart enough to say, all right, we got to pull over. And, you know, sometimes you have 4 people in the car that can drive because you are pulling a trailer. So not everybody can do it or feels comfortable. So, you know, and then that's nice, you know, all right, I'll take 5 hours. You take 5 hours. You take 5 hours. We're there. Or sometimes, you know, I did 15 hours straight one time, and it's hard, you know.
No, I mean, I've never driven a trailer.
Yeah, and you have to think about it. You know, like when you're driving your car, you kind of zone out, and, you know, with the trailer, like if you even want to switch lanes, you really have to heavily think about it, like a minute beforehand, and like, all right, I gotta make sure there's enough room, I'm gonna do this, and you can't go too fast, and it's a whole other layer.
But yeah, you poor son of a gun. That's another theme that emerges in looking at your posts. Numerous instances where it's like you finally make it home after working X number of hours, and there's a call that there's a leak or an alarm going off, or you know, something like that.
Nature of the beast, but like you would think like, you know, okay, this happens once a year, like a pipe break or something. It's every week something happens, and you know, I have to say, like, there's an asterisk. Like, have my hands in so many things that, like, by default, I'm going to have more things happen, you know what I mean? But still, it's sometimes mind-numbing that the amount of things that can go wrong.
I know. I've really given this thought because, you know, it's like, oh, does this guy just have like the worst luck? But I think it's a combination of things. I think it's like, yes, you are involved in, you know, 2 small businesses with the tattoo shop and the shop. So I feel like those things just tend to lead to more of those types of issues. And then you're adding on the conventions.
And
again, running your own and attending all these other ones and the travel. It's like so many things that just, you know, not that you're asking for it, but like there's just so many more opportunities.
You are opening yourself up for sure. And I acknowledge that. But at the end of the day, it's just like, how many things can go wrong? And it's like, you know, like you don't think about it. Like, you know, you could have like a field mouse go in the attic and chew a wire and your alarm's going off and you got cops calling you at 3 a.m. or like, you know, I think we went over this one time. Some lady just like drove straight into our AC unit and just destroyed it. And the cops are calling you. Like cops call a lot. It's always something.
This was one of my favorite posts. Okay. Really not con related, but this ties in with our discussion of your luck. The bank gave me an extra $1,500 today by accident because the girl was new and got confused, and I returned it. So let's see how the universe still finds a way to screw me over, despite the good karma.
Yeah, no, and that's true. I mean,
did anything happen to you?
You know, I don't remember. It all kind of blurs. But I have this thing, like, and it's really weird. Like, let's say they didn't notice, and I took the $1,500, right? And I didn't get in trouble for it or anything like that. Literally, within an hour, like my transmission would die on my car or something, and it would be exactly $1,500. This has been like a current theme through my entire life. Like one time I was at a convention, I won a raffle for like a $2,000 like entertainment system, and my engine died on the way home, and it cost me almost to the dollar what I just won. And this has happened to me so many times, like I can't even begin to tell you. Like, so it's just comical. If anything good happens, I'm like, oh boy, I'm in for it. Like, I'm going to win the lotto and promptly just get hit by a bus or something like that. That's just my luck.
That's crazy. Well, when we do our Never Stop, Never Pop miniseries, we can delve into this further. This is a very nice post. You know, we've been focusing on a lot of the challenges that go along with your con adventures, but you know, you posted a screenshot of a really nice message that you got. You guys are great. I wish you were in Philly more. You guys got my money all day long. You know, and I'm sure stuff like that is very gratifying.
And going back to, like, I forget what we were talking about at the beginning of the show where I said, like, those are the things that really keep you going.
Right.
Or when people come in and they say it's nice, you know. I get messages like that every so often, or from other like you said, like you're doing all these things and you run yourself ragged, and you see there's somebody else out there doing it too, and I get that a lot. Like, hey, I'm just just starting a business, and like I see how much work you put in, and it's really nice to be able to see it, and I just want you to know somebody out there, you're helping me, and things like that. It really, honestly, that means like the world to me, because that it really feels like, at least like even on the worst day, you don't think that somebody out there is watching, and maybe you're helping somebody else, and they could be like the next big, not that we're like the biggest thing in the world, but like who knows who you're inspiring, you know what I mean? And that's really cool, because that's one of the things, and we'll get into this next season when we go through the Dragon's Den thing, but that's, I've said it before on this show, that's one of the reasons we opened the store to begin with, is because we grew up in that environment. We made our friends that way, and who knows who you're inspiring. So yeah, stuff like that really, 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 truly means a lot.
Cool. Well, as we wind down our conversation here, I mean, I guess I have to ask, and we've been talking about, again, what you do when you're selling pops, and I know, and this has come up in other episodes, but, people tend to have certain feelings one way or the other about pops. Sure. And their presence and their role at conventions. I mean, I don't know. I guess, how do you respond to those? Like, oh, there's too many pops.
It's definitely a valid concern. I mean, yeah, we joke all the time. Oh, it's PopCon, 2018, because it is happening. Because, like you said, like even the vendors that don't sell pops sell pops. Like they'll have like 3 they got in some collection or something like that. So it's just everywhere you look, you see these things. But I mean, if people weren't interested in them, I think it's just really taken things by storm, and at the detriment to certain other things, like where I might have bought a statue or an action figure of something before, I don't, because I'm buying the pop. And I think it's definitely siphoned money out, because I notice that even when we have a show that maybe like everybody else is like, oh, I did really, really bad, we still did, even if we didn't do phenomenally, we did okay. And I think that, and I talked to the other dealers, the bigger ones, and they're saying the same thing. I think it's just that that's where the interest is right now, and that's where the money is. And then other vendors might see that, and they're like, well, I better start carrying these pops. But it's like, it's an all or nothing kind of thing. I think you can't sprinkle it in. You either need to have the goods or don't do it at all. And I think that's where they make their mistake. And those are the guys that you see like, oh, I'll take $3 for it. I just got to get out of it, But it is a thing. They're everywhere. Some people hate it, but I think that over the course of this year, people have softened to that mentality a little bit. I don't know why. Maybe, I say this all the time, there's a pop for everybody. And maybe that happened to them. They're like, oh, I wasn't buying any of these things, but then Labyrinth came out and I had no choice. And that happens all the time. And I think that so many things have come out that it's just sucked everybody in at this point, and it's just a phenomenon. It really is. And we'll see. We'll see what happens in the long term, but I think they're around.
Yeah. So, I mean, generally speaking, this is still something you enjoy?
Yeah, I joke all the time, like I hate pops. I never want to see them again. But obviously I love them. I have a huge collection myself, And you could have the best job in the world, and you're gonna hate it after a while if you see the same thing all the time. But
that is true. But as far as just the vending
love
aspect,
wins out. I do. But it's a little of everything. Like I'm not gonna lie to you. There's plenty of times I come home and I'm like, I could just be home watching a movie or playing a video game and like unwinding. Why am I doing this? Especially like if it's not, again, it's not the most profitable thing in the world at all. I don't care who tells you otherwise. So you really have to love it. And sometimes that love wavers a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think about it. If I stopped doing it, I would really miss seeing the other vendors. Like I said, the traveling is fun. You get to hang out with your friends. And I do enjoy all these things. I'm a collector myself. So I like being in that world, So it might be 20 different things sprinkled in that make you want to keep doing it. But you do want to keep doing it, And when you have those shows where you're like, I got to stop, you take a breather. You just forget about it for a couple weeks and you're ready to do it. I'm pretty burnt out now, but we have 2 shows left until March, so we're going to have 3 months. By the time March comes around, we're going to be like chomping at the, all right, let's get on the, So you have to have that break. The people that are doing like 40, 50 shows a year, I don't even understand how that's possible. They, they're just grinding it out and they hate life. You got to know when to dial it back, I guess.
Right. I guess the last thing I want to ask you is, really out of everyone I've spoken to on the show, not to sell anyone short, but I think you attend the most shows most regularly, again, out of everyone I've spoken to on the season. So you probably have a pretty comprehensive view. I mean, again, I know you only go so far west, but it's still like all the shows that you go to, I think you have a pretty comprehensive view of the convention scene. Beyond things like more pops and the rise of cosplay, like, I don't know, any other trends or anything that you're like, this is what cons are about right now? Like any things that you've observed?
I think they're definitely celebrity based. And that's probably the most contentious thing for everybody, for whether it's attendees, vendors, so this comes up a lot. There's people like us that tend to do well at the shows that are very celebrity based because for whatever reason, those people tend to be the people that are into the more pop culture-y things. You know what I mean? Whereas like a comic vendor nobody will shop with them because there's no comic readers going to those shows. Then you have the shows like Baltimore, even C2E2, where they do have a lot of very big guests, but that's not the focus. And you have a lot more comics there. So, that's the most contentious thing. But what people have to realize is, case in point, at Rhode Island this last weekend, they usually have the really, really big celebrities in our building, and there's a little sky bridge that connects to the main convention center. And they had like the still big guests, but like maybe not the headliners in there with the vendors. This year, because the Artist Alley people last year were complaining that the traffic from the guests were blocking them and they weren't getting any business and blah, 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 they moved all the guests upstairs and just had vendors on the floor. And people were down 80%, 50%, like they were crying, and understandably because it's a very good show generally. And, that's the thing. People don't realize that people can go shopping anywhere. They can go on Amazon, and we do sell unique things and people like to buy them in person, but that's what's bringing the bodies in. So you got to realize that. And it's like half the people hate it and half the people love it. And I think that's the biggest trend is that everybody's shifting towards that. And it's a weird, delicate balance because if somebody spent $200 to get their autograph and photo with somebody, that's money maybe they don't have to spend with the vendor. But then on the flip side, maybe you're attracting a higher buyer where they have more money, and that $200 just means they have that money to then go buy more stuff. So everybody has a different feeling on that, and people argue till they're blue in the face. I'm a firm believer in the having the celebrities there, but having a nice balance of it, and that it does attract that better, higher end buyer. And I directly see it in the sales and what sells. So I think that's going to be the biggest issue. I do think that the whole industry as a whole has been in, I don't want to say a bubble, but for lack of a better term, I will use that. And it's been bursting a little bit just by oversaturation. And, it's not what it was. You would look forward to the one or two shows you went to every year, all year, because it's all you had. But now, you can wear your costume every weekend if you want. You can go hunt for comics or pops or do whatever every weekend. And it becomes desensitizing. And, you can pick and choose now, where before you had to go to this show because if you missed it, it was a whole nother year, right? Now, if you live, especially in the tri-state area, you can go to 30 shows in 30 weeks, without even really traveling. So.
Well, I appreciate your insight on that and, all of your adventures as a vendor. Is there anything else that you wanted to share?
No, not off the top of my head, but no, thank you for having me. I really do. I love listening and being a part of these type of things because I like peeling the curtain back. And as a listener, this is what I love hearing, especially because I don't deal with comics as much. I like hearing the comic guys. So right. As a fan, I love shows like this. So I really think you've been on a really great trajectory. So thank you. No,
I appreciate all of that. And so, you and I are going to keep talking because not only are you a vendor, but you are a convention organizer as well. So in the after show, we're going to talk about Undiscovered Realm Comic-Con 2019. And you and I, we only had a very, very, very brief conversation before we started recording. So I'm very interested to actually hear what's in store. Yeah,
we're definitely in the initial stages, but we'll talk about that.
So cool. Well, thank you again for being part of this.
Thank you for having me.
Where can people find and follow you?
We're always available online at undiscoveredrealm.com. You can follow us on Instagram at Undiscovered Realm, Facebook. We update there constantly with all our new products, and you can get in touch with us day and night. And you can check out our Comic-Con coming next year on May 4th and 5th at the Westchester County Center, Undiscovered Realm Comic-Con. And we'll probably be in a city near you at a show, so just keep an eye out.
Awesome. And if you'll indulge me, we're at the end of the season here, so I'll just offer some parting words before we sign off for the season. In a lot of ways, it's fitting that this Comic Shop podcast spent an entire season on conventions, because after all, if there's been one driving theme on the show, it's community. And you see that community writ large at cons. Like comic shops, comic cons are a place to connect, share our passion, and celebrate the characters and stories that unite us. They're often big and too crowded, and there's a decent chance you'll suffer from con crud when it's over. But there's also something incredibly powerful about being surrounded by so many people who love the same things you do. Thank you to everyone for listening to this season of My Comic Shop History. I hope to see you at a con sometime. And until then, don't be a flat squirrel.